What's up, Tyler?
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, it's going great, dude. We got...
I'm just over here getting to some emails.
we got JLC this week, man.
I know.
That's
insane.
Crazy. Like, crazy.
A lot. There's been a lot of traveling. That came quickly.
Yeah, we're talking twice?
2 times, yeah.
Two times. So if you guys are headed to Providence this week, we're talking Thursday at 3:30 p.m. A guide to capturing all of your costs. 5th floor, room 551. That's from 3:30 to 5. And then on Friday, buckle up. Bring your Bring your coffee. Bring a snack. 9:30 to 12:30. That is 3 hours that we are going to talk about how to keep your client happy in 10 ways. Same 5th floor, room 551. That's basically our room at JLC. We're going to talk about some stuff.
Yeah, so I think the trade show starts Friday.
Mm-hmm.
So that's Friday and Saturday. But there's a bunch of educational presentation sessions that start on Thursday.
And dude, I don't know
so just make sure that you're aware of that if you're going.
And you got to register. And I saw today that over 135-ish already registered.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You have a live count?
Well,
you're getting pinged every time somebody signs up.
I'm not getting pinged, but it says registration count is 135.
Damn.
So make sure you register.
On the same note of JLC,
yeah,
Paola might be like the happiest person or kindest person that I've ever experienced in my whole life. Like, you say that I don't need to respond to emails, but I like today I wrote like, thank you very much. And absolutely, Tyler, you are most welcome. Hope you have a lovely week. Smiley face. And it's like, she's the nicest person to ever live.
Fair.
I hope she's that nice in person.
Just all up front. And we'll get to meet her at the conference. So yeah, if you guys are headed to JLC Live 2024, March 21st through the 23rd, we will see you there. We'll try to bring some swag too.
Oh yeah, I got stickers too.
Oh yeah. So if you see us, stop us, say hello. Speaking of a guide to capturing all your costs, today we got Matt from Adaptive, which is a relatively new software. And let me back up. If you were at the Builder Show, I'm going to talk about this early in this podcast, but that Builder Show grew by like 30% in vendor count. And if you were at that show, you probably were overwhelmed with how many software companies are entering the market, which we can look at the negative, but the positive of it is that we are innovating and we are bringing technology into the industry at a very fast and furious pace. The problem is that we need to now navigate, through what's worth adapting, because that is the hardest part of software and technology, is adapting it into an industry such as ours that is already difficult and stressful enough. So we're going to chat with Matt about what Adaptive is, what it does, what they're focused on, and I think that you'll appreciate their niching down to some of the financial issues we face as contractors.
Yeah, I've been doing a fair amount of consulting calls, and with our last presentation at IBS, and presentations that we have coming up, and just speaking to people and realizing how much of a disconnect there is between their numbers on a day-to-day basis, like real time, and what they think is happening, and how critical that is to the success of every project. So I think that obviously understanding that if software can help, it really is one of the most important things that you can do for your business. So hopefully listening to this podcast and this conversation will help shed a little bit more light and clarity on that.
This podcast is brought to you by Andersen Windows. Hey, what's the best way to install a window wall? With Andersen's easy connecting joining system. That's how.
Why?
Yeah, why?
Well, simply put, it makes your job easier and your customers happier. With Andersen's innovative joining system, you can install large window combinations with less hassle and more efficiency. In fact, most contractors surveyed said that they could reduce the number of installers by 50% using the Andersen Easy Connect joining system. With this patented system, large window combinations are split into smaller subgroup combinations that are factory assembled, have all the necessary joining components applied, and arrive ready to install directly into the rough opening, making installation at the job site easier. Learn more about how you can use this system on your next project at andersenwindow.com/pros. You guys should all know this by now, but that is ANDERSEN windows.com/. Wait, is that backslash or
That's
forward
forward
slash?
slash.
/pros.
Hey, if you're like me, you love free resources that can help your business grow. So here's a can't miss tool to help you reach your goals in 2024.
Buildertrend is offering our listeners, a free strategic planning template essential for sustained business growth. It includes, but not limited to, a step-by-step instructions on how to outline business goals, a comprehensive example of a completed template, an editable Excel sheet for instant execution. That one almost got me again.
Almost.
Editable.
And it was actually created by the Breakthrough Academy, and it was designed to help you establish a clear trajectory for your business while navigating uncertainties.
The Breakthrough Academy is a program for contractors that teaches them the skills and processes needed to increase profits and tame the chaos within their businesses.
So get your free copy of the strategic planning template today at buildertrend.com/strategic planning. And guys, make sure you head over to moderncraftsman.co. We got swag on the website. We got all of the website, all of the podcast episodes up on the website. So if you want to go back and look in the archive, dig into some old stuff, it's all on the website.
They're all up?
I'm pretty sure.
Man,
And
that's
if I'm
that's
wrong,
impressive.
someone's definitely going to let me know.
All right.
All
Maybe I'll
right.
be the one.
All right. Text me later. You co-founded Adaptive, which is
Mhm.
why don't you give from my side of it, and then I want you to dig into it. But it is essentially like helping solve one of the biggest issues in the construction industry is managing ARAP. And
Mhm.
and especially when we think about cost plus, like there's a lot of noise around cost plus and how to accurately track this stuff and how to accurately keep track of your books. And one of the conversations that comes up a lot is the fact that in theory cost plus should protect the builder. It's like essentially isolating you or insulating you from discrepancies in cost, where it's like, what, like I'm just going to bill whatever it costs plus my fee and I'm good. Like all the risk is on the homeowner. But that's not the reality. The reality is like it creates an enormous amount of administration work and paperwork and tracking that, oftentimes more times than not, the builder is missing things or letting something slide. Like I've used the example, it's like, whatever, it's $2 Home Depot charge, like not a big deal. Like I don't need to bill every dollar to the job. It's like, yeah, but you do that 400 times, it's $800, and then you times that
Yep.
by 30 people, and you end up losing out on thousands and thousands of dollars. And prior to even Adaptive, but a couple of years ago, we went through this whole like, how do we manage these receipts? How do we manage ARAP? How do we make sure that everything that we spend, we're capturing? And we did a study for 1 year. It was like $100,000 that just ended up in our overhead mistakenly. Which is, I mean, I just want to be very.
What'd you do with it? You lost
It,
$100,000.
I'm sorry, it wasn't. We did the study for a year. Like we did the study in the year that we went through this process, but I think it was over the course of 24 months. We had lost $100,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
I got to increase your adaptive subscription. We got to crank up the
This
price.
was years ago, Matt. This was years ago. Like
Okay.
you know, the point, but the point is like I'm not the only one that deals with this, and I know that this is where adaptive kind of all came from. So, walk me through what it does, and then we'll get into your history and how you got into this.
Yeah. So you had said ARAP. I think for a lot of people don't know those terms, like accounts payable. Just to clarify, accounts payable, paying subcontractors, accounts receivable, getting paid by your customers, getting bank draws, etc. What are those two together? Cash flow, right? Everyone understands cash flow. That's important. We're very focused on that part of the process for builders, right? How do you make smart decisions around cash flow? I think that in terms of the gap we saw in the market, it was that owners and their teams are spending just way too much time on this, right? So they have this really inefficient back office process where it's either the owner themselves that are spending a ton of time on it, or they're paying people in their office to do things like reconcile credit card statements, chase the field for receipts, receive subcontractor bills, enter them into the accounting software, hand them to project managers to make sure they're approved and coded correctly, pull the draws together. Most of our customers are still writing checks to subcontractors. So the list goes on with the inefficiency in the process. And the end result, I think, is that teams spend so much time simply keeping their financials updated, when really what they should be spending time on is paying attention to their cash flow, paying attention to their budgets, right? Analyzing the information rather than updating the information. And that's what we're very focused on. So we're focused on, we call it an automated financial management platform. We use artificial intelligence, we use kind of automation rules, and we use really intuitive design to kind of eliminate a lot of the day-to-day work so that we can give teams time back to spend resources on the things that actually differentiate their businesses. So that's what adaptive is.
And like, why did you get into this?
So I've always been involved in real estate one way or another, and construction. So my first job in high school, I worked at a pool contractor, digging pools. And then I started a painting business in college, which is how I paid for a lot of college. I then pivoted to real estate and worked in investment banking, focused on like REITs and large developers, Lennar, et cetera, like big builders. And then worked in investing for a while in real estate, and went to business school at Stanford. I wanted to start a business focused on real estate, right? I knew the space and teamed up with two classmates in business school, Francisco and Henry. Our original idea was related to helping spec builders basically find lots that they could rezone, split up the lot, build 4 houses, 5 houses when it's currently zoned for 1. And the way we thought we'd make money with that is helping them put the financing in place, right? To get a loan to buy the lot. We would go to the banks, and the first question the banks would ask is, okay, lot looks good. Let's talk about the builder. Can you show us that their historical projects were profitable? We say, okay, no problem. Let's go back to the builder. And when we started talking to these builders, we realized it was actually quite a challenge to figure out how projects performed historically. There was pretty poor record keeping in these businesses. And I would say concurrently, go ahead, Todd. Yeah.
Intentionally poor records, or
I mean, maybe to the client, but not to the bank where you're trying to get a loan.
Yeah, it's like lying by omission or ignorance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, definitely that's a piece of it. But there was that, right? So you see it limiting the business's ability to scale. You typically need some financing, and you need a good process to be able to scale. And then when you talk to builders, they just hate dealing with this stuff, right? I hate dealing with bookkeeping. So we're like, okay, this is a much bigger opportunity. Not only will it serve spec builders, it's every builder, every construction company, subcontractors, developers alike. Seems like a real problem. Let's focus on this, okay? So that's how we got to the idea. We raised our seed round in April 22, so it's been just under 2 years. We launched our product last year at IBS. We had 15 customers at that point, some brave souls who decided to work with us while we built the product out. And we went from 15 to 200 customers in the past year. So we've grown rapidly. We just raised a new round of financing. So overall, things have gone quite well. It's been a fun journey.
I want to talk about like the fundraising, but we'll come back to that. One of the things you talk about, IBS, we were just there. We obviously saw you there. And I was reading this article, I think it was yesterday, that was talking about this year's show and how it was record breaking. Every year is record breaking. But one of the stats they talked about was that this year they had 670 vendors, which was, I want to say, something like 230 more than they had last year. And so, for those that can't do quick math, like that's like a third more vendors, which is insane to think like how big that show is. If you guys have been to Las Vegas, the show is now takes over the entire convention center, and they just had that entire West Wing built, just 2 shows ago, and that's filled. But one of the things I realized is a lot of it is tech. And we're starting
Yeah.
to see a real big push in tech. And a good friend of mine is super involved in the tech space for specific to construction. And one of the things he talks about, when we chat, is the companies that are niching down. And this is what you and I had chatted about, and this is what you're kind of getting at, is you looked at one thing and said, let's just be great at that. And someone had asked me, it's like, well, I would love a software that did everything. And for a long time, I think that was the goal. Like, I just want one software that does everything. It's like, why do I need multiple social medias? Like, can't I just have one and just like have everything be on that? But the reality is like, we're all accustomed. Like, I open my phone up and I have 4 pages of apps. I don't need I don't need to order my coffee in the same app that I'm also following a gym routine on, that I'm also ordering groceries on. Like, it's just, that's not how I'm programmed. And I think it would be super weird if I had one thing that did everything. Eventually, I'm sure Amazon will just like do everything and I don't have to even ask it, but that's beyond the point. So when I think that the financial side of construction, it's no surprise to anyone that's listening to this that you went back to the builders and they were like, well, I don't really know how profitable these were. I've been in that position too, and going through the fundraising round of like an investment in a spec. It's like, I realized that a lot of that information I just didn't have. And it wasn't because I was actively avoiding it. It's like, well, how well did this job do? I'm like, frankly, I finished that job, and the moment I was done, I had to move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And that's that's really what happens is, it's not that we don't want to know how well we did. It's just like, for me to go backwards and make sure that I have a full understanding of it, that's not a good use of my time. I'm better.
The problem is, Nick, that you're going backwards in the
Exactly.
first place, and it's not real time. Like,
Right.
and I've had multiple phone calls recently about this, where people are like, what's the biggest thing that you've done for your business, or that you did when you started your business that had an impact on it? And I was like, honestly, when I changed the business essentially to be charging for whatever the job costs, and tracking the costs day to day, and allocating where the funds are going towards what task and how much time we're spending on each task, and looking at that on like a manageable interval every 2 weeks, rather than I can look and say, hey, what's the job cost right now? What have we spent? What did the last 2 weeks look like? Rather than finish the job and look back, and like, at that point it's too late. You can't manage a budget after the fact. And doing that real time has been one of the biggest changes for profitability of my business, more so than anything else. Just like understanding and knowing your numbers real time.
Yeah, I mean, the real time piece of it, I'm glad you hit on that, because I think that comes back to the point I was discussing earlier. You said it much better, around just spending so much time doing the bare minimum, right? Trying to keep things updated. There's very little time for analysis. The second piece of spending a lot of time keeping things updated, it means that they're often not updated. So you rarely have access to real time information. And then the process repeats itself, right? How are you supposed to make smart decisions if constantly your information is a month or a quarter dated.
I mean, realistically, like Nick, for you and for myself, the success of a job is, especially with cost plus, right? You're supposed to be managing that budget and finding ways to, whether it's adjust scope or possibly value engineer design to maintain the budget. And if you're not going to maintain the budget, bring the customers into the conversation with how to drive the financial ship. And if you don't know what your numbers are while that's happening, you're not going to successfully manage a budget. You're not going to be able to successfully manage schedule, manpower, everything else. So, like, especially with what you do, Nick, if you don't know your numbers as they're happening versus like what they're supposed to be and where they're supposed to be, it's really going to be difficult to be successful because you could still complete the project, but if you're over budget and past due on schedule, now where you like technically, yeah, the customer, it's over like it's over budget, they should be paying for it, but if you poorly managed the budget or didn't communicate that to them, like it's not a successful project for you.
Yeah, I mean,
Which
I think that's the, you know, it's something that just completely goes by the wayside on every single project for so many people because it's just too much work, and that's where, you know, everyone's chasing for the solution. Like, I think Matt, you and I chatted about this at dinner in Vegas. It's like everyone's chasing for this solution, and everyone is trying to do it in one way or another, and it's like, but they're also trying to do 16 other things. It's like, no, just like help me understand my numbers. Help me understand like my work in progress, my WIPA. It's like, and when you bring that up, it's like, you know, people are like, I don't even know what that means. It's like, well, how much money is actually yours versus, you know, how much have you collected, or how much are you financing for this project right now? And that, like, and not understanding that is where we get into these cash flow issues. If you surveyed the entire industry and you asked what the number one issue was, I would say maybe today would be people, but it's there's a close second that it's cash flow, and it's always a cash crunch. Like, no matter who you talk to, myself included, there's always like cash is always on our mind as to like, hey, what, you know, why are we light on cash? Hey, why do we seem like we have too much cash? And it's always a question that we're trying to solve, and like you said, it's like having real time information and being able to look at it and understand exactly where we stand. That's all, like, for me, that's all I care about. And for years now, you know, with a couple different people I've worked with on the financial side, that's all I've asked for is like, listen, I'm not going to be the guy that understands how to put all this together. I could sit down and plug this in and figure it out and update it. But that's the way I operate is like, I know what I'm trying to understand is I just want to understand what's my cash basis. Like, how much cash right now is ours that belongs to us that's in the bank, and when does that go away? Like, the only way you know that is if you truly can update it live.
Yes, exactly. And that's not, you know, understanding your cash flow is extremely important. It's a massive problem, but it's not what makes your business super differentiated, right? Like,
No.
you differentiate in other ways. So it's kind of non-core. So it's unfortunate people have to spend so much time on it, and that's why we're trying to solve it.
It's like people aren't hiring you being like, what's your cash flow status look like right now?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, let's hire. I mean, it probably would be a really smart way to hire people, but most contractors would be like, honestly, I'm not sure. Let me get back to you on that. I've been trying to figure that out for 10 years.
That's a great point, though, because I think a lot of, like, tech specifically, like a lot of this stuff we're trying to implement and then we're trying to sell to the client. And truthfully, you know, you having good cash flow or having a good understanding on your finances, while you're right, Tyler, like, it probably is a really good thing to kind of check off. They don't give a shit. Like,
no,
you tell me how this benefits me. It's like, well, it benefits you because I'm not going to steal money from you. It's like, well, you shouldn't be doing that anyway, so try again.
Yes. Yeah.
It's
yes.
like,
well, it benefits you because I won't go out of business halfway through the project.
Yeah,
We
and
give free estimates.
Yeah.
And I think
we have insurance.
But I think from you, like for you, Matt, like that makes it even more difficult to from a software perspective. It's like, hey, it is a problem that we have as a builder, but it's not something that I can sell to the client like this super sexy 3D rendering thing that I can plug in what their house looks like and it shows them exactly like that. That's a benefit to the client. So I'm stating obvious here, but like your target market is builders and contractors. Is it cost plus fixed cost? Like who is it from the financial model world?
I think we work with a variety of customers. Definitely we have a lot of customers that are in custom building. We also have subcontractors, and we have real estate developers. And increasingly so, we've had larger commercial GCs using the product. So I think while you're right that maybe it's not necessarily a feature you kind of sell to your clients, like I have my back office really in order, I think it's kind of table stakes to grow your business. If you want to grow your business, right, you need to have an understanding of what's going on from a financial perspective, especially as you start to get into the commercial world when your clients are real estate developers. And at that point, they do really care about what's going on in your back office. They're not necessarily consumers focused on the style and beauty of the home. They're more focused on they are financial buyers. So we have a range of customers across the board, working with different types at this point. Yeah.
So when people are using your program, your software, your system, what does that look like? Are there like certain buy-in packages? Is it custom care where you're taking on unique set of circumstances and tackling unique problems for each client? What does that look like on your end?
So we've been in market for a year. So our pricing is pretty straightforward. We wanted to keep it simple early on. We are focused on tying it to just the return that builders get when they buy it. So we want to make sure it makes sense. They're getting enough value out of it. So we give people access to all the features in the product. The price difference is purely based on how large they are, right? The more volume you're doing, the more automation helps, the more time you're saving. So that's how we think about pricing.
Does it cost you more money for that for someone that is a larger company?
Yes. So making payment, we offer free electronic payments in the product, and we got to pay every time someone makes a payment.
Got it.
Hosting costs, various pieces of technology that we use to scan information, right? Those all scale with size of the customer.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, it's similar to some of these project management platforms where, based on your revenue. And there's a lot of software nowadays that is based on revenue. And I've always wondered, it's like, well, what is it a bigger risk? Is it actual cost? I didn't, and, or is it just a bigger profit for a bigger client? But, naturally there's additional costs for a bigger firm, and I'm sure even from a customer support standpoint that that's where a lot of that cost is probably eaten up.
Yeah, there's customer support, although I would say it's generally pretty easy to onboard to our product. So it's typically, Tim did it on his own basically, right? So we do have scales. I think ultimately when you think about pricing, just with anything, you're trying to think about what's the value to the customer? What are the other options in the market? So for us, if you're a larger builder, maybe you need to hire one bookkeeper, maybe you need to hire two bookkeepers, three, an accounts payable person. So you're kind of comparing, right? That's how pricing works when you're thinking about alternatives. And so generally you try to orient pricing around something that makes sense for your customers in terms of the value they get out of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. In terms, you mentioned what else is available on the market. One of the things, and Reese is with you, and I send stuff to him constantly as it pops up. But one of the things I'm realizing, and I'm curious your take on it, is in this tech world and in this software world, with all of these companies popping up, how are you managing that, where it seemingly easier than ever to develop a software company or a new app, and forget all the noise from my side of it, where it's like, I'm being promoted app after app that's being targeted to me because I use this one, so every other competitor is going to now market to me. How are you managing that, and kind of trying to stay in the forefront of all of these people coming to market at the same time?
So you're saying how have we basically got the word out about Adaptive?
Well, no, I mean, like, I sent him one the other day. It was another. I was like, this looks exactly like what you guys do. He goes, it is. I'm like, all right. So, like, how are you managing that? And it's similar to me, where it's like we have competitors, right? So I need to think about, like, my unique sales, um, you know, proposition to a client, like from your side with tech and it evolving so quickly. What are the things that you guys are paying attention to, or what are you guys focused on in terms of, all right, well, this is how we're going to capture market share?
Yeah. So I think it kind of, I'll answer your question directly, but little detour first. So the comment you were making in the beginning about we do everything, right? A lot of these software companies say they do a lot of things. It's less about what they say they do and more about how well they do it, right? So this is the issue with when you try to do everything at once, you don't really do anything in particular very well.
Sure.
So come back to answer your question. I think there might be companies out there that say that they do certain things. I don't think that they do them particularly well. The way that you do things well, right, it's a combination of listening to your customers, so relentlessly talking to your customers every single day, and building a really strong team. I think we've done internally that can produce what customers want. So I think we've done a very good job with both of those in the early life of our company, which has allowed us to grow, which has allowed us to raise more capital, which allows us to survive and be the winner in the long run, right? So I think that's, to answer your question, right? There's always going to be competition trying to solve the same problem. It's a matter of how good your solution is, and the quality of your solution is informed by how close you are to the problem and the customers, and then how good you are at executing against it. So I think that's how we think about it. In terms of actually competing on the go-to-market side, if you look at how we've grown in the past year, we've gotten a lot of business from our existing customers or from accounting firms that focus on construction. So there's an element of also of a first mover advantage here, where you get into the market, customers like you, they start talking about you, they recommend you to others. And that's how we've gotten a lot of our business in the first year.
Yeah. I mean, that makes, like, it makes sense, because especially from the side of partnering with accountants that focus on construction, I think that, in the few that I've worked with in the last, say, 10 years, most of them are doing things pretty manually. And oftentimes I was bringing things to them like, hey, what about this? What about this software? What about, and it's all it was always welcomed, and they would look into it, but it was always this learning curve that they had to get over. And I think what you kind of addressed that a couple minutes ago, is that onboarding is relatively easy. Tim, who you mentioned, is our controller, and he essentially onboarded us himself. The other side of this is, when we talk about, like, being that it's our biggest focus is the finances and understanding cash flow, it's like, but how does this relate to everything else that we're dealing with? And what is your trajectory in terms of what does this software do today, and what you hope it does in a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? Like, right now we're talking about just managing cash flow. Is that where it ends, or is there more of a future to that?
Well, I think that kind of, long term, where we would stay focused, we don't really want to venture into the project management realm. I think there are good solutions on project management schedules, tasks, to-dos, etc. I think that the real problem is in kind of back office, right? So expanding beyond cash flow to cover full accounting, to cover payroll, etc., is a lot of what we're working towards in the future generally. So the general area where we'll focus. More specifically, what we want to do is, if you look at, you can look at cash flow within an individual company level. So within your company, for example, and then you can look at cash flow across construction, right? How slowly money moves from, say, the bank to the GC to the subcontractor to the end worker. Our long-term goal is to kind of streamline that entire process. Okay. So we've started with a focus on general contractors, which places us squarely in the middle, right? All these general contractors are paying subcontractors through our product. Subcontractors have similar problems to GCs around cash flow. I think we need to make a few tweaks to the product to really serve them well, but they have similar problems. So what we see in the future and what we're working towards is streamlining that process kind of end to end, so that when an end worker on a job site requests getting paid by their subcontractor, it doesn't take 90 days for the subcontractor to ultimately get the money from the bank and then from the GC.
Matt, with your product, is there a sweet spot for like the size of the company that you're looking to serve?
Yeah, right now we focus on builders generally between 3 to 50 million in construction volume.
And how did you guys determine? Is it just that like the investment isn't worth it from a consumer standpoint? Like if you're doing less than 3 million, it doesn't make sense to pay for the product, or is it you guys can't come in at a price point to serve those people, or there's just not enough value there for them?
It's more the price point piece. So, early on, you got to focus somewhere, right? And we have some level of, entry level pricing is $300 a month.
Yeah.
And it's not totally worth it for us right now from a customer support perspective, onboarding perspective, to go lower than that, to Nick's point earlier. So yes, it's a matter of, at that entry level price point, at what volume level do you start to really get value from the product? So,
like, what are you gauging a successful customer experience right now?
So ultimately, what we talked about in the beginning is the problem is in the time that people are spending, right?
I mean, so to be completely transparent, like to understand if it's $300 a month base fee and that's $3,600 a year, like if there's that much value there, how are small companies not finding value in that with like what you guys are able to offer? It doesn't seem like a huge number.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. I mean, how many transactions you have per month at that volume. Volume's a little bit of a kind of a proxy for how many bills and receipts you actually have. But generally, that's the point at which I agree. Thank you for endorsing that. It's not a huge amount of money.
Well, I mean, I look at even right, like stuff that I used to do myself that I now hand over to a bookkeeper or an accountant, and it's generally like if you averaged it out over the year around that price point, maybe a little bit less, and that's like a number that had I known that when I first started my business, I would have 100% handed that over to somebody else to save me the time, the headache, and the energy from doing that. It doesn't seem that steep to me, which is why I asked, like, what's your metric for gauging a successful experience? Because like to bring somebody $3,600 worth of time, like over the course of a year with the product, it doesn't like. I don't feel like you'd have to do that much.
Yeah, I mean, there's another piece of this. So there's the volume, and then there's just once you start to get to a certain level of volume, you tend to see owners that really care about this, right? They're very focused on their financials.
What's that volume?
So I'm saying generally, right? There are builders who are probably doing,
I know it's a general, but
they're super dialed in.
Yeah.
So at 3 million, generally when we're north of 3 million, like people are signing up for Adaptive.
Yeah.
Love the product. They see the value, they get it. It's important to them. They're signing up. So there's the pure time savings in the business, which is tied to volume of transactions that you have. And then there are how much of a priority is it for the owner to understand their cash flow, right? To understand their financials.
So when you onboard a customer now, and they're using your system and your product, again, like what do you feel? How are you gauging that as a successful relationship? Are you just waiting on feedback from the consumer, that they're re-upping their membership every single month, or what are you using to gauge, hey, this is working?
So ultimately what we're trying to solve for is making sure they're getting a good ROI, return on investment, right? That's what we're paying attention to. Now, to answer more specifically how we track that, if Tyler said, yeah, I hate dealing with the bills, I hate dealing with receipts, I hate preparing draws, I don't want to write checks, all these things, Adaptive make it easier for me. What we would hope to see is that you're actually running all those records through
Yeah.
and because we work with QuickBooks, we can see how many of those records you actually have, right? So we're measuring what percentage of draws, what percentage of payments, what percentage of bills are actually being run through Adaptive. And that's how we look at it. And of course, each of those records has time associated with them. And that's how we get to the ROI.
So now that you said it's been a year, that you've really broken out with the company, so I'm sure you have some experience with contractors and different size businesses and different scales. What if there's been one thing that has really like stood out as a red flag to you, other than just like, yeah, the financials in general, but what's one thing that you feel most contractors are just messing up that they could focus on, Adaptive aside? But like, what has this led you to realize where it's like, hey, if there's one thing that you can get a grasp on, this is it, with your research and your experience?
Yeah. So independent of Adaptive entirely, one of the biggest problems I've seen through onboarding customers is that they have these really messy cost code lists in their business. So the cost code list is either too long or it has multiple different versions of essentially the same cost. It's trying too hard to be exactly the same as their estimating sheet. And it's impossible to code at that detailed level, or it's way too summarized. So various forms of it being a problem. But when you don't have a good, clean cost code list, it's hard to do anything else right, because that's the foundation for how you're keeping track of what's going on.
That's such an interesting topic, because we've changed our cost codes in the last 10 years. I can't tell you how many times, and it's a nightmare, and no one ever wants to do it, but then we bite the bullet and we do it. And I had a consulting call yesterday, and one of the questions came up was like, hey, what'd you model your cost codes off of? I'm like, well, they're modeled off of the 16 divisions, but they're kind of customized for us. And I said that, I'm like, why are they customized for us? Like, why aren't they just standard? And I remember specifically and I'm curious your take on this, Matt, but specifically we wanted to be able to chart these labor, material, and subcontractor separately. And for a long time, we basically would have like cost code like 4110 was labor, 4120 was like 10s, 20s, and 30s were labor, material, sub. And then fast forward, we just have one blanket cost code, and then we have a nomenclature of LMS, so labor, material, sub. And in that way we can chart it back to our accounting, which is QuickBooks, in the appropriate category to, for and why this is important for those that are listening and don't know. It's like, the reason it's important is like, you want to make sure that it's coded appropriately, for so many reasons. But let's talk about just insurance. It's like, you get audited and you think all of that material, all those material costs come in, which is one of your largest costs, and they think it's labor. Now you're paying general liability and potentially workers' comp on this number that's you shouldn't be. So you're making sure that we separate that by labor, material, and sub. What was my question? My question was, so in seeing this and seeing that this is such a big issue, what is your thought, or like, how do you think that this could be resolved?
So how do I think it could be resolved? Well, let me answer your question first on why it's not necessarily standardized, why it's hard to adopt. I think, in my perspective, and Tyler, would be interested to hear yours as well, why it's hard to get a standard cost code list. I think that the projects differ quite a bit in small construction, right? So the actual level of detail that you need differs depending on the business. So that's probably a big part of it. And the second part is that say there was some sort of standard you wanted to change and adhere to, it's hard to just change your cost codes overnight, because ultimately it's not just you as the owner that needs to understand them, your whole team needs to be familiar with them. It's almost like the language of the business. So there's a decent amount of education that comes with changing the cost code list as well. So I think that those are two of the reasons maybe you don't see a standard in smaller construction. Obviously you do a little bit more as you get into commercial. Now, your question on what's a way to, I guess, improve the cost code list. I guess a starting point would be focused on it and be aware of what is in the cost code list, right? So,
like, in your opinion, what should be in those in that cost code list? Like, should it be separated? Sorry to interrupt, but like, one of the questions that came up in that conversation was specific to our millwork department. And, for a long time, we had cost codes for every task. That way we could go back and audit and be like, how long did it take to sand doors versus fabricate doors versus finish doors? And then and per
Well,
item.
are you using that for historical data or for budget, like managing a budget?
Well, both, but we realized that from an accounting perspective, it was a nightmare. And I think this is what Matt, you said. It's like people are too focused on trying to get their cost codes to tie out to their estimating software, where it's like it's different.
Yes. So I do think Tyler's point on for budgeting or for historical financials is important. So I think that a cost code list is a balance between the level of detail you want to go into, that it can actually be useful across projects, right? So consistency across projects, but isn't too onerous when it comes to day-to-day coding, right? So if you had and you wanted to break out labor into, or framing into framing labor or framing materials and framing subcontractor, for example, right? Or you wanted to break framing down into the individual lumber and nails and everything that you're ordering, are you actually going to be able to code at that level of detail accurately on each of your projects when the ultimate bill comes in, when the actual receipt comes in? If the answer to that is no, then it's probably not worthwhile to have a super detailed cost code list, because ultimately what's the point? It's not going to be accurate anyways. So that's the piece on the coding. And then in terms of splitting it up, right, a consistency across projects. If on projects you're shifting between having kind of internal labor do framing work, and then other projects you're shifting to having a subcontractor do framing work, and they're also buying the materials, then it might get a little noisy when you're looking across projects at what did I spend on, framing labor versus framing materials versus framing subcontractor, because they're going to be kind of in different buckets depending on the project. So I think you got to think about it both in terms of across projects, how do I want to do my reporting? And then on a day-to-day coding level, how detailed do I want to get?
Isn't all of this what's going to affect like the accuracy and the consistency of what you guys are doing?
Yep.
Like,
yes.
So, and like what I'm thinking, right, is that you're looking to onboard all of these clients, and then while you can't you can't create consistency and a standard for the entire industry. At least your small sample size, you're trying to make as close as possible to each other so that you have points of reference and like a datum point to measure everyone off of, because if it's apples to oranges, there's no way of actually comparing all this crap. Is that the goal for you guys when you're bringing customers in, to like get everyone to be able to somewhat speak the same language while still holding on to some sort of like business agency for themselves?
Yes. Yeah. You put it nicely. So speak the same language while holding on to their own, business agency, or maintaining a language that is familiar to their company. Okay. So we are very focused on this. It's probably the biggest piece in our onboarding process.
I mean, that just seems like a very difficult task.
Well, for us, so there's a lot of the discussions we've been having around how do you design your cost code list, and then there's a discussion around what does it actually look like in your accounting software. So even if, say, builders have a clean draw schedule, and it's like, yes, this is the codes that I ultimately want things to roll up into, in their accounting software, they might have the past 10 years iterations of cost codes they've been using selectable in a drop-down list, right? So a lot of the problem we run into oftentimes is that the actual list itself in the accounting software is messy. Yeah. So part of our onboarding process is when you set up Adaptive, all you have to do is sync your QuickBooks, and we pull in all your historical data. So there's really no setup, right? All your job costs, all your cost codes, everything. So the initial process is sync your QuickBooks and give us your budget. All right. So give us an example client budget. We run a quick analysis to look at how does this cost code list line up to the budget, which is kind of the common language within the company, right? The budget is what people are talking about. Everyone understands the budget. How does the cost code list align with that? And then we work to make sure that those match. So we'll deactivate a bunch of these old cost codes. Yeah. We might rename or merge some codes, and we help people do cleanup more so than we do help them do like overall design of their cost code list.
And you'll have a standard for when you guys are integrating and implementing these new cost code lists or changing them, so to speak. You guys will have a standard that you're working off of, so that once everyone's in your system, it's nice and easy for you guys.
It doesn't necessarily need to be a standard for us, right? We are using, like I mentioned, artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
So it can learn as you go, right? So all that matters is that you have a clean list to start with, and then as you code things, we will learn what the right code is across your vendors and across your projects. We can also take things like looking at the budget and saying, okay, these cost codes are on the budget. That should inform the model. It's more likely that it's this cost code because that one's on that budget.
Yeah. So I know that you quickly spoke to what your long-term goals are, but being that you're creating this system and this like entire software program, and then this like community of people, and you said that down the road you'd like to be able to be somewhat of like the liaison between getting people paid more quickly and dealing with the financial end of things. Is the goal to circle back on why you started this in the first place and help with the lending process and people being able to have all of their ducks in a row when they go to secure financing or lending?
Yeah, I mean, I think our goal is to kind of bring financial clarity to the construction ecosystem, right? The financials are, I mean, you made a joke about it earlier, sometimes intentionally not clear and intentionally opaque, but oftentimes not clear just because it's hard, right? It's challenging. And I think it's not just challenging within companies, it's challenging across companies. Ultimately, all these companies, subcontractors, end workers, suppliers, GCs, they're all working together on the same project, kind of on the same budget. So how do you bring clarity across these companies? And yes, part of it is helping with getting financing, but part of it is just speeding up the payment process while projects are going, right? So if everyone's on the same page, it makes money move much faster. And then people aren't waiting forever to get paid, which means they can get things done more quickly.
I mean, does adaptive create an opportunity for you to rebirth that existing or that original business idea?
I wouldn't say the original business idea around, zoning and finding lots. I think it's more, it's a bigger problem we're trying to solve now, right?
Yeah.
Just how does money move through construction overall? In the future, it shouldn't take, 90, 80, 60 days to get paid when you complete a stream of work. It should be verified instantly, and people should be getting paid for the work that they've been completed.
Is
so that's
there
what we want to work towards.
Is there a world where that becomes instantaneous? And I think where my question is rooted in terms of, if a client, like, basically you're funding a sub says, hey, my work's complete, and then I get notified and it says, hey, your tile guy said his work's complete, do you agree? Yeah, I agree. You fund the tile guy, and essentially then we pay someone like Adaptive, like becoming that essentially bank, and we have this, what is it called, not reserve account, but essentially this account where like money lives, and we're paying for it, or maybe you're charging me a fee, or maybe the subcontractor has the opportunity. It's like, hey, for an additional $10, we can fund you right now, or you can wait your 30 days, or $100.
I think those. Yeah. I think so. That's a great question. I think that it's a matter of timing, right? I think in the future we can bring enough clarity to the overall industry to make things instantaneous based on people just agreeing that work is completed and someone is owed money. I think that that's what we want to work towards in the future. It's a long march to get there.
Yeah.
In the immediate term, I do think there are solutions such as what you're discussing, where one thing we've been asked for time and again from our customers, we haven't built it yet, is exactly what you just said. Send a message to the subcontractor, hey, payment's coming out in 30 days. If you want it now, you can get it now. It'll be a small fee to get paid faster. And then we would front the cash to pay them.
I mean, you could it could literally be a 3%, same as a credit card. And I think about, Uber, right? When you order food, it's like, for $3, it can get here 10 minutes faster. Like, I'm always hitting that $3 thing because I'm starving. And someone the other day was like, that's bullshit, right? Like, it gets there when it gets there. Like, and they were like, don't click it one day, see how fast it gets there. Freaking got there the same exact time. And it's like, but I mean, and I'm not saying that this is the same thing, but it's similar. Like, it's basically giving you the opportunity to speed up the process. And lots of people will take a 3% hit to have money faster.
But I mean, the whole reason why it's taking so long right now is because there is not much financial clarity within the businesses. So like it's taking so long and it's so convoluted because there's so many steps to ensure that the funding's in place before they start cutting checks, where realistically, like, I'm small enough and can manage my finances closely enough and have relationships with my customers transactionally and personally that I'm not funding their renovations. And when a sub completes their work, they get paid for their work as soon as they invoice me. And that's just because my business model is very simple. It's very lean. I'm doing one job at a time. It's not that complicated, but my numbers are very transparent. If I don't have money in my bank account, I can't cut somebody a check. And I know what's coming in every 2 weeks. I know what I'm owed. I know what I'm invoicing for. So it gives me the opportunity to pay people as soon as they complete the work, because I'm able to invoice for it as soon as they complete the work within a 2-week window. And I think that that's a big issue within our industry. It's just like nobody knows whose money is whose and what money is what and where it's owed. It's just it's in this pile, and it's like, well, I don't know if we have money to cut a check for that, because did we get paid for that? Have we accounted for that? It is very convoluted.
You said it better than me.
Not to mention, like, I'm just I'm just thinking this whole process through. What you just said, Tyler. It's like you can invoice a client, like a sub bills you. I feel like I'm consulting for software right now. Uh, maybe I am. But hey, sub hits me up like, hey, my work's complete. Yeah, it is. I don't have, but I know I don't have the money for it. But I'd like to get paid right now. They pay that 3% fee. Adaptive fronts that money, and then turns around and says, hey, Nick, you owe us this money. And no additional fee. Like, you just owe us the money because the sub paid the 3%. And then I say, hey, my client hasn't paid me yet. It's like, okay, well, you have X amount of days to pay it, or then you incur a 3% fee. So now Adaptive or whoever it is, right? Like is now making money, lending that money, which is cheaper than a line of credit. A line of credit's 10%. So it's like, I would be doing the same thing where, you're centralizing it. And I think, what the root of this is, I'm truthfully making this more complex and creating potentially more cash flow issues by using money to pay money by costing me more money. But the point is like that speed in our trades and our partners. And I think that's one of the most important parts you're trying to solve, is that, when when we get through the shit of a tough economy or a good economy, you have all these trades that ramp up and ramp down, and all of that loyalty stays with the guys that treat them well, and oftentimes what is considered being treated well is being paid on time and not
I
having
mean,
to chase money.
the other thing to consider, right, like you would assume that if you're hiring a business and they're an established business, that they either have a line of credit or they have enough of their own equity or financial backing that they could fund a renovation for a certain amount of time. But I've just never understood why we do that as an industry, like why you have a line of credit to fund a project at risk to you that's going into a customer's home. That just never really made that much sense to me. Like the way that I operate now is I take money or a retainer, and or where I'm looking at my greatest exposure throughout that job, and I'm holding that money so that I'm ahead on every payment for that job, so that by the end of a 2-week interval, right, it's 13 days in, that's my most at risk that I'm going to be before I invoice for that 14-day period. But I've already accepted payment to cover that most at risk, wherever the biggest liability is throughout the job, so that technically I'm never funding a customer's renovation. And that, like, is the easiest thing for me. We're not working for people where we're going in and saying, hey, I want to check, like you go to buy a car and they want to run your credit. They want to see how much you make. But then we can do a $500,000, $1 million, $10 million project, and nobody's ensuring that our customers have the money to back those projects.
But
But
now,
it's,
so insert that into a third party, and again, like, Matt's just quiet listening to us develop his
it
next
is, but it's like,
10-year map.
why is everyone else paying a percentage on a customer's project when it's their work that's getting done? It's like if you were going to get
But
a car built,
no,
like,
but hold on. Like, I agree with that. But the example of the credit check and how much money do they make? Like, a lot of builders have that in their contract that they can verify that they actually have the money.
but don't use it.
No one uses it. Like,
No.
I've asked 100 people. They're like, no, I've never. Like, I don't even know how I would ask someone, can I see your bank account? Where you insert a third party, where it's like, all right, well, hey, Adaptive, like, we're going to be doing this project with this client. Can you run a financial analysis to make sure that they can fund the job? Like,
Yeah. Yes.
like, is that like, have we taken such a hard left turn that we are on a different page, or is this?
100%.
I don't know. I mean, I think
100%.
it's an interesting discussion. I think that the ultimate point you're both making is that you And our customers are in the business of building, not in the business of being banks,
lending money.
but they're often asked to be banks.
And we
And that's a problem.
we spend so much time trying to understand when we are lending. Like
Yes.
the whip
Yes.
the whip report, right? I talked to a number of builders, and they all try to do the whip report. It's complicated. We're going through it right now, and ours has become this like monster of a spreadsheet because, we're trying to figure out labor and like our billable rate versus our cost rate, our burden rate, and then truly like, but then we're holding $250,000 in a down payment escrow. It's like, it becomes super cumbersome where it's like, are we funding the job or are we not?
But it
Yes.
just shouldn't be that complicated, Nick. Like, you want to get your truck built. Is that guy going to build $100,000 worth of your truck if he doesn't have that money already? No. So like, why? I don't like, all right, you want to give me $100,000. I'll put $100,000 worth of work in place, but then I'm not working again until you give me another $100,000. It shouldn't be as complicated as we make it out to be. And I understand it's not that simple. And I guess a lot of this does come back to the whole adaptive conversation where like my business model is very transparent and it's very simple. So I understand like I'm never funding a renovation, and it should be that simple for everyone. Like it should be that transparent that my systems are set up to protect me in a way that I'm never funding a customer's renovation, and you shouldn't be. Like there's no need to be. It's not on your own home. It's not a build that you're doing for yourself, where there's risk involved. This is 100% for a customer for their own home. We shouldn't be funding that.
Yeah.
Good, Matt.
I was just going to say, I think part of what it sounds like for Tyler, you have the advantage of being you're a solo GC, right?
Yes.
So you kind of have all the context across your projects, and you're working on one at a time. I think as you start to scale and add team members, and different people are responsible for different parts of the financial process, and you're maybe using Excel and QuickBooks and project management software and email and shared files, that's when it starts to become difficult because you gotta bring together all the communication, you gotta bring together all the systems.
It's extremely difficult, and like that's one of the reasons why I don't go that route. Like I don't want to deal with that. But if there were a system or a program out there that would give people the financial clarity to like understand what they're funding and what they're not, and where their company lives on that fence, on what side of the fence, like I think that we would be able to make better decisions financially. We'd be able to handle our budgets, our schedules, our payments to everyone much more easily. It's getting those things in place because at the end of the day, like you said, like that's not what we do. That's not where we excel as business owners. Somebody else needs to step in and handle that and be like, this is our specialty. This is what we do. We're going to create a system where you can look in and understand your financials very clearly, and there's very little gray area.
Exactly.
Yeah, if I had more people, I'd be sold, but I don't want more people because I don't want to be dealing with this shit.
I mean, we do have a lot of solo GCs that use it as well. So that's the other profile. Deal with this.
Matt, I think the conversation back to the cost codes, I think, is a telling story here in the sense that we get into this industry and we set up these systems in terms of like, let me back up. When I started my company and I built all the cost codes, I literally downloaded something offline and pumped them into QuickBooks and used those, and then went 2-3 years until I realized that I need to restructure them. And what happens there is, I think that's why we get into these situations of poor reporting, is that we start these companies without this stuff in place ahead of time. And someone asked me, similar to you, Tyler, like, if what's the number one lesson that you learned, and if you could do it again, what would you do? I said I would have systems in place before I started my company. I wouldn't have one credit card transaction like processed until I had a process in which I was going to capture that and code that correctly, because the the constant going backwards, just like we said in the beginning, it's like when you finish a job, the last thing you want to do is go backwards and see if you made money. It's you got to move forward. But a lot of us operate with that mindset of like, I got to ignore what's behind me and just focus on what's in front of me. It's like that's fine, but if you're bleeding and you don't know you're bleeding because you're not looking behind you, then every job is just
You're just
replenish.
treading water.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that becomes a dangerous situation where it's like then something takes a turn on a project, and it's like, man, I don't have any cushion here. It's like, why don't I have any cushion? It's like, well, you've been bleeding for the last 9 years.
Yeah. I mean, I think the cost codes, while it's a challenge, and while I commented earlier around how it probably can't be super effectively standardized across companies, don't think it's that complicated to come up with a cost code list
I
that
don't think
works
so
for your
either.
company and
Yeah.
then stick to it. The key is making sure you stick to it and making sure everyone in your company understands it. And then it's pretty straightforward from there.
Now that you guys are digging into a lot more companies and people that you're working with, are your findings as bad as you anticipated they were going to be? Like, is it as much
what
of
I
a
wanted to
mess as it seems?
I mean, it's like anything, it's a range. For sure, I think it's a problem that is kind of broadly occurring across businesses. Now, the extent of the problem differs, right? Some companies might have pretty good visibility into their financials, but they're spending a ton of time and money to get there,
Yeah.
right? And then some companies have zero understanding, and then a lot kind of fall somewhere in the middle. And we see things all the time. I onboarded a customer a few weeks ago, and one of the things we do in our product is flag whether something might be a duplicate bill. And the customer, the person on the line was kind of the accounting person in the office, and the owner was also on the call. And the accounting person said, "Oh, I like that because sometimes I get a bill from a sub and I just pay it, and I realize after the fact it was a duplicate." So you'll have things like this happening. Another customer we onboarded recently, when you sync up with QuickBooks, it pulls all the historical costs into the budget page, regardless of whether you've added it as a cost code. We're just like, hey, someone coded to this project this cost, so it'll all show up there. And when they logged on and looked at that, they realized, oh, I forgot to bill for $5,000. I forgot about that cost because in the Excel budget I was using, I didn't have that cost code there. Or in the project management software budget I used, I didn't have that cost code, so I forgot about it. So I think that there's a ton of, like leaky bucket type of things where people are just losing track of cost, and it's like turning into real dollars on both invoicing and payment side. So yeah.
Is there a general standard as far as who's in better financial health? Like, sadly, the people who are probably in best financial health probably aren't getting a hold of a company like you or looking into their financials because they're probably just like, hey, I'm making money. But are the people who are spending the resources to have financial visibility typically in a better position than the people who are not? Or is it unique to each company?
Yeah, I think it came back to what we were discussing earlier, where, understanding your cash flow, understanding your financials is not going to really be your bread and butter of like how you differentiate, but it is necessary if you want to build a real big business, if you want to scale your company. So naturally there's a correlation between company size and quality of financials. Generally, the larger the company, the better place they're in.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. I would also say that on the other hand, just because you do have financial visibility and understand your numbers doesn't necessarily mean that your company is going to grow to its max potential without other resources or understanding like what to do with the financial visibility and understanding the health of that. Because at the end of the day, you have to consider the trade and the craft and what you're putting out there and the relationships and everything else. So it probably helps, but I think at the end of the day, they need to supplement each other. Like one shouldn't be independent of another.
For sure.
So you guys are working with Nick now?
Yeah. We signed up Nick.
Is
how's it
his
going so far?
is his the worst thing you've ever seen, or the best, or is he falling in the middle?
Definitely on the tail end.
I mean, I think Nick's
Let's
got a
just
pretty
pull
tight,
it up on a mutual screen and start digesting what we're looking at here.
Nick's got a pretty tight process. You got a pretty competent team over there.
Yeah.
People are pretty dialed in and focused on it.
Yeah, and truthfully, like the reason we did it is we had a very similar system set up with my last financial team that was remote, but it was just there was a lot of pieces to it, and it was very like human centric. Is that the right word? Where like there was just a lot of people touching it, but it was dialed, and I talked about this a couple of years ago on the podcast where we were capturing, like we would literally capture every single receipt that came in. And I knew that process was dialed, and that we did a very good job capturing it. But the issue is it was just very, human centric. So when Reese reached out, he was like, I can simplify that. And if you guys don't know Reese, it's worth getting to know him. Because he will literally sell you, ice cubes in the winter. Like it's just he's ridiculous, but he's in the very best ways. And I know he's gonna listen to this, so hi Reese. But he was like, I can simplify that. I'm like, how? I'm like, this is so dialed. We have this whole process dialed. He's like, that it's automated. We'll do the receipt capture, and we'll show that there's this is a simpler approach. And truthfully, my team was like, no, because I was introducing software after software after software, and my team's like, we have fatigue, we can't do this. And I was like, can we just like learn about it? So we learned about it, and it was again, it was a no. And then I think I went around and I was like, Reese, walk me through, like, here's an example. Walk me through how this process works. And he did, and it simplified our receipt capture, and essentially our costs coming in by like from 3 steps down to 1 or something like that. So yeah, I appreciate you saying that, Matt. I think we do have a pretty dialed process, though we can still be significantly better, and that's the reality of it.
Yeah, for sure. Reese, we're getting a podcast going with Reese actually, so you guys will have to come on to the podcast.
Nice.
Yeah. Reese was our first business hire. It's basically like he was here from early on. When we had 15 customers, he was there with me at IBS last year. He's grew up in a family. His dad's a custom builder. He's got a giant beard. Used to work at Buildertrend. He's the man. You'll have to meet him, Tyler.
Yeah. So from a startup perspective, you guys had this idea and this brainchild for the business. After the inception of the business and the idea, what's the next step for you guys to get this from like concept to beginning of creation?
Yeah, great question. So we had that realization, and we didn't immediately go say, let's start building software. We wanted to we want to understand it a little bit better. So what we actually did initially is we just started a bookkeeping firm focused on construction. And we just signed up a couple companies and managed their books.
Sounds like fun.
I never envisioned I'd be so adept at QuickBooks, but I know a lot about QuickBooks.
It's like my worst nightmare.
That's what we did. Yeah, I mean, we were running a bookkeeping firm, and that experience told us, okay, yeah, there's a lot we can do here. I mean, if you look at the tools we have to manage our financials as a startup, right? We have a lot more of the latest technology serving startups, right? And so just comparing that to what was available for builders, we're like, okay, this clear opportunity here. We really understand it. There's a business opportunity here. So we went through this kind of manual validation period where we just ran bookkeeping to start. And then we went and raised money. And I think when we raised some money, that gave us a lot of credibility because we didn't just rush into it, right? We took the time to make sure we understood first.
The whole idea, it's so foreign to me, the idea and the notion of like building software, when I find like even the general sense of the word building, I find to be like a very visceral action, and something that is like tangible and concrete. And then I think of software and I'm like, my mind, I can't even wrap my head around that.
I'm with you. I've
Dude, it makes like, what would the first step in that be? Like,
Well,
open my
luckily,
computer and call Doug? Like, I have no idea.
no offense to Doug, but I don't think and maybe he does know how to write software. I have no idea.
I don't either. It's just like, it's crazy to me.
It's coding, right? And and I say that like a complete idiot, but it's all developed from code, which is another
yeah.
thing I don't understand. It's like they're teaching it to kids in school now, which I think is awesome. But I'm like, how do you? I mean, where does that? I'm gonna make a reference here, and I hope people understand it. Do you remember GeoCities
I
or
do not.
homepage.com?
Oh, where you could write
You could make your own website.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I did that
GeoCities,
in like
yeah, like in,
career class.
oh, so it was like a hobby of mine. I used to build websites all the time, and
I've never heard of GeoCities.
you never heard of GeoCities?
I don't know what GeoCities is now. No. But anyways,
Either way, like you would build your own website. And I remember like you would have to host, like if you want a logo, you would host it on like PhotoBucket, and then you take it and then upload it to the and essentially it was, drag and drop website building. But then I remember like you could see the coding for it. I'm like, but I don't understand how you apply that to software. Where it's like
I mean,
is it the same thing?
Part of this is right. You got to have a team to build a company.
Yeah.
And luckily, we had our co-founder Henry, who studied computer science at Berkeley and worked in tech in software before this. So he is kind of the mastermind in terms of building everything out. I would say it's kind of interesting because obviously there's complexity in coding, but a lot of the complexity with software, and I spoke about this I was on Mark's podcast last year, is a lot of the challenge with building a product is knowing what to prioritize.
Yeah.
That's a huge challenge in software, right? You don't want to spread yourself too thin. You don't want to do too much. You also don't want to do too little. So how do you balance that? And that's the great challenge of software, especially for early stage companies when you don't have a ton of resources yet.
I think that is probably a really good word of advice, not just for software, but for anything. I mean, with respect to what we do as well, you can't just hone in on the micro level, and it can't be on the macro level. Like, you have to figure out critical path, what needs your attention the most now, and work in that manner. I think that generally gives you the most opportunity to be, or the greatest opportunity to be successful.
Yes. That is the key.
Yeah. I mean,
especially when you're an entrepreneur and
Nick,
you got to figure things out.
Nick, how highly involved have you been with this process so far? Or is this somebody else? Is this Tim mostly handling this?
Adaptive?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
I'm surprised I haven't said that before. I wouldn't say I'm high. Like I'm involved, but I'm not in the weeds of it.
I mean, has it shed light on areas of your company that need work?
No, this wasn't something that because we already had built a manual process like that. We've already solved the issue. This is simplifying the issue.
Okay.
Our issues are elsewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, like, have you spoken to Tim for feedback on this? Like, obviously we can't like talk to anyone else about this. But from your perspective internally, has it been helpful?
Oh yeah. And truthfully, he brought it to me.
Okay.
So he was like, hey, this is gonna, I see, he came in at a time where we were departing from our prior controller and onboarding him. And he saw the process in which we were doing our the receipt logging and capturing all our costs. And he's like, hey, I think, Adaptive would actually solve this and make it easier. And because the other team, he basically replaced like 5 people that were working part-time. Granted, Tim is full-time, but he stepped in and was like, hey, we don't need 5 different people touching this. I can be one person, and have and utilize software to streamline this process.
And you don't think that he would have that capacity to be able to do that very well if it weren't for software?
No, I think it would be very difficult. At least,
I mean,
especially like in the first, 6 months or so of working here, and to develop that process to catch up as to where he needed to catch up to and be current. That's a tremendous ask.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that in the use case specifically that Nick is speaking about around credit card receipts, I think it's helped Tim take a process that before was you got your whole team making purchases. You are hoping that they submit receipts as they make those purchases. Inevitably, a lot of them will forget to submit the receipt. And then maybe they'll submit the receipt, but they'll forget to say what job it's for, what cost code it's for, et cetera. And then Tim kind of has to manually go through a bunch of files and reconcile against the credit card statement 30 days later. And then whatever hasn't been collected kind of has to go back and figure out who made the purchase and so on and so forth. So pretty painful process. With Adaptive, it's just you have a mobile app. Super makes a purchase at Home Depot, pulls out the app, takes a photo, asks him 2 quick questions. Is this for a job? Is this what cost code? And you're done.
Yeah.
And then Tim has everything. It matches to the credit card statement automatically. You don't have to spend time chasing each other, reconciling things.
It's I feel like I started doing a lot of this as I fumbled my way through this more recently, where it's like, don't put this off. Do it now. Like, having the ability to, whatever you're doing, if you're tracking costs, if it's receipts, if it's time on a job, if it's extra work, like I started doing that even with the guy Justin who works for me, where it's like, track your hours throughout the day according to what we're doing. And you think that it's a lot of work. And it is. Like, it's more work than not tracking it.
Right.
But at the end of the day, the amount of money that you're making is much greater proportionally than the amount of work that you're doing. Like, when you look big picture and how much more you're actually capturing and accurately charging for and not losing, the amount of work is minimal. To try and figure it out after the fact is 3-4 times as hard and way less accurate than just taking 2 seconds to slow down and do it immediately. And I think that, again, I mean, it circles back to what we spoke with earlier, that in order to understand where your company's going and how you're doing and how to manage a project and manage your employees, your customers, your projects, your entire company, like, you have to have your finger literally on the pulse of what's going on real time. And if you don't, it's almost too late.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot of wisdom in what you said. I mean, even the part of, I think generally a good rule for kind of personal productivity is if you get an email, if you have a task, if it's going to take less than 2 minutes, then just do it.
Emails aside, I don't get the emails. That's like,
just,
there's an exception to the rule. Emails are not them. They're not on that list. Well, I think it was Ben Franklin who said, like, what put off till tomorrow that you can do today. Emails does not. There's like a little sub note where it's like, emails not included in this. So sorry if anyone's been emailing me.
That fits. Doug told me about your love of technology. So
no, yeah, luckily I've gotten everyone pretty much onto a text message stream, because the Slack app, for some reason, I just feel like I can ignore that, and I don't know why I can't ignore text messages. So it's like, if you want to get a hold of me, this is going to be the better way.
And on the other way, it's like, I'll ignore text, but like in email, I have to address. And it's, it's getting to a point where I have this note written down like time block emails, because I spend so much of my time just responding to emails or catching up, where it's like I don't need to, but it's one of those things where it's like it's open. I'm like, oh, I'll just address that real
Yeah.
quick, and I
Yeah.
shouldn't.
Nick will always tell me he can tell when I'm not working or I'm like home from work, because there'll just be like 15 emails in a row within 10 minutes from like 3 weeks ago. Like,
You did it last night.
I'm just getting my emails now.
You did it last
Damn.
night. I was like, I was watching you reply to stuff. I'm like, dude, that doesn't need a reply.
I'm staying on top of things. It's the little
Real
dude.
time.
It's the least I can do, you know.
Real time. Real
Well,
time.
yeah, I appreciate the insight as to what you guys are doing. Nick had been discussing what you guys are doing, telling me about your company, but I was excited to hop on here and hear it firsthand from you. I never know what's coming out of Nick's mouth, if it's the truth or not. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Nick
did my
and I had a
best.
good steak dinner in Vegas.
We did.
And at the end of everyone ordered beers. Nick didn't order beers because he's, a healthy guy.
yeah,
But then at the end of dinner, no one
dessert.
ordered dessert.
The
but Nick ordered
the
dessert.
only person at
Yeah.
the table. I was like, you guys gonna get dessert?
I saved my calories for dessert.
I did it the other night too. I went out with some of the guys that are part of the 45 White Oak project, and dessert menus came out, and everyone's like, yeah, maybe. So I order it, and no one else orders it again. And
I'm not sharing it with
it
you.
gets to the table, and one of the guys is like, there's 4,200 calories in that dessert. I'm like, I didn't, but now I do, and now I
don't
don't
ruin
know.
it for
I
me.
might eat it. I might just go for it because no one else ordered dessert. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Trailblazer.
That would be me. Yeah, it's super cool to see what you guys are doing. I'm excited to watch it continue to grow and see where it goes.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. It was good meeting you guys. Good having a discussion.
yeah, good to
Lot of
see you,
good
Yeah,
man.
let me know when you guys are opening up an office in Denver.
Yeah, or you can just come on across the river here and visit us in New York.
It's true. Oh,
Awesome.
man.
Well, Matt, I appreciate you being on, man, and I appreciate what you guys are doing, and I appreciate you involving us in developing it and being a resource and a support for the industry. So it's cool.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. Catch you guys later.
See
Yeah,
ya.
absolutely. Good luck with everything.
All right. Thanks. All right. Bye.
I don't understand why people don't get dessert. Did you just mute your cough?
Yeah. I didn't want to cough right into the microphone. I think
I mean, I don't
honestly, dude, my honest opinion, I feel like people who probably aren't in like peak shape or are not confident in
that's the thing that
themselves physically,
Mhm.
like they don't want to be like, "Oh, I'm a slob ordering dessert." And like if you're not drinking and you're not consuming calories that way, and you keep in shape and you exercise and you're like, yeah, I want to treat myself with dessert, and you feel confident about yourself, that I think that you're probably fine. But that's like something our culture and our society accepts people drinking to oblivion and consuming as many wet liquid calories as they want, but then will judge somebody because they ate ice cream
Yeah.
and be like, "Oh, you're a slob because
Mhm.
you ate ice cream." Meanwhile, you just drank 12 margaritas and everyone was like, "Oh, you're the best. I love you." Right?
Yeah.
It's I just feel like it's more so that where they're like, I don't need this, and people are, I don't feel great about myself, and people are gonna be like, oh, and then she got ice cream, then he got an apple fritter for dessert.
I wish they had an
That's
apple
my
fritter.
opinion. That's my opinion.
So I didn't expect a real answer out of that, but that does make a lot of sense. I'm going to follow that up. What is your favorite dessert?
Favorite dessert?
Favorite dessert? Like
That's tough.
like
But
you go out to
growing up,
eat at a restaurant, like, and you finish the night off. What are you getting?
I'm not like a huge restaurant dessert guy, but if like I would go out for ice cream after dinner, like go to an ice
Okay.
cream place.
What kind of ice cream?
it depends. So there's like 2 shops that we'll go to. One, and it may sound crazy, but like I grew up going there. Rachel's not from around here, and I was like, they have the best soft serve ever.
What
It's
is it?
just like their soft serve's really freaking good.
It's not it's not a chain. It's just some local place.
No, it's just like it's been there forever.
Mm.
And they have like the girls home from college who work there
Mhm.
and collect money for their colleges, and it's just like a hometown type place.
Mm.
Um, and they have just the best soft serve. So we'll go there and get soft serve ice cream. Or there's another place that's a little further and closer to where we used to live, and there's another place near us that makes it's like an Italian ice. I don't know why they call it Yum Yum. The place is called Leo's Famous Yum Yum. It's like their own thing. But it's like a really dry water ice type thing. It's more of like an Italian ice where it's not like the syrups in it. It's kind of dry, and that's also really good. It's like somewhat unique in its own thing, and like a little bit of a Medford staple. So I would say that that's probably it. Dessert for like, oh, somebody's gonna make me dessert. My mom makes a dope ass coconut cake that's so good, and it's like each piece weighs 2 pounds.
Mm.
And I will take that with a glass of milk and be a heavenly child for the rest of my life. How about you?
The glass of milk just threw me for a loop. I haven't had a glass of milk in.
Dude, if you're eating coconut cake, like
All
I
right.
feel like I'm gonna be a 6-year-old and be like, get me a glass of milk and some coconut cake and I'll be happy.
That's funny. Um, Key lime pie is my go-to.
Damn.
I love key lime pie.
Really?
Yeah, like if they have it on the menu, even if
Graham
I'm.
cracker crust?
Mhm. Yep. Like
Yes.
if it's on the menu and I am totally stuffed, like I will
Yeah.
make the exception. I'm like, no, I have to get it. That
Yeah.
with some espresso at the end of the night, that's my go-to.
Key lime pie is not bad. Definitely not my go-to, but I wouldn't like if somebody offered it to me, I wouldn't say no.
Mm, that's fair.
I like carrot cake. Carrot cake's
I
good
like
for
carrot
cake.
cake. Yeah, I actually, as a kid growing up, I loved carrot cake, and my grandmother would always make it for my birthday. Like
Yeah.
I remember going to birthday parties as a kid all the time. It's always chocolate vanilla cake, and I would always
Carrot
have
cake.
carrot
It's like
cake.
an old person cake.
I know,
Like
and the kids
nuts
would be
and
like, they
raisins.
would make my own cake because the rest of the kids would want like vanilla or chocolate
Yeah.
cake. Um, yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, it's tough to say no to dessert, but
I know.
you get to an age where it's like I can't be eating dessert every night even though I want to.
I know. The candy thing, I still have an issue with Meg, I swear she has more candy in the house now. Oh, you know what I realized? I haven't had Girl Scout cookies in a long time, but those Thin Mints,
Oh
man,
yeah.
like I for the last couple days, not every day, but over the weekend, like I cleared a sleeve or two.
Dude, a sleeve is like nothing, which is crazy.
I mean, it's something.
You could eat a box of Girl Scout cookies and like
I
still eat after.
No, I know, and that's the like, I'm looking at it, I'm
Yeah.
like, and I'm like, "Dude, I couldn't help myself," and Meg's like she's like, "You're gonna eat all of them." I'm like, "You literally bought an entire carton of
Yeah.
Girl Scout cookies." It's like there's a cardboard box of 24 boxes of Thin Mints. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not gonna
So
eat all those, but I'm gonna
Rachel's
definitely
like
eat a box.
yeah, Rachel's like the cookie mom for the girls
Mm,
troop, so we have boxes and like big boxes of cookies in the room. I just honestly I don't like crunchy cookies.
mm.
So Girl Scout cookies, the only ones that I like really think are decent are the they used to be called Samoas. I forget what they're called now, like the coconut ones.
Yeah, yeah.
Um I like soft cookies. I don't like the crunchy like
Yeah.
Oreos and stuff. Not that they're good cookies, but like it's the equivalent of filing your nails. It gives me like
Oh,
the shivers.
that's weird. Yeah.
Yeah, so
I
I
like
don't like
Oreos.
crunchy
Yeah.
cookies. Not a fan.
Well,
So I don't have to worry about the Girl Scout like the 18 huge cartons of Girl Scout cookies that are in the other room. I'm like, nah, makes my teeth hurt.
that's funny. All right, well, let's leave the episode on that note, and on Instagram, tag us in your favorite dessert. Now I'm curious.
Oh yeah.
get some ideas. See you guys next week.